Dior is known for producing some of the highest quality fragrances in the world. And they're known for men's fragrances, women's fragrances, and plenty of unisex fragrances. And I have a small list that I think pretty much highlights the really high quality that Dior has to offer. Starting with a classic men's fragrance. This is Dior Homme Original. There's several versions of Dior Homme. This is the original, I suppose. This is unique because it features Tuscan iris. Iris is one of my favorite notes in fragrances. I think it's a really nice, light, slightly sweet and refreshing floral note. Not something you would expect from a men's fragrance in particular, since homme means man in French, but I think it actually works really well because it also features some other more masculine notes, heavier notes in the base layer, but that really, the Tuscan iris is in the middle note, the heart note area, and that really just kind of forms the body of the fragrance, which I think is very crisp. It's sweet, but not sweet as in a feminine perfume. Just more of a natural floral sweetness, and it's just very refreshing, very kind of more of a professional fragrance, I would say. And as for the sweetness, it's very minimal. It's definitely not something super sugary or super artificial or syrupy. It's as if, I would say, you are smelling a real iris, you know, it's very pleasant. Then, if you are not so much for the male floral section of things, you could go for a fragrance that I think is very interesting. This is Tobacolor. If you can guess from the name, this is a tobacco-forward fragrance. This is actually unisex for men and women. So, the thing about this is that obviously the main note you're going to get is the tobacco. Tobacco is another one of my favorite notes because it's just rustic, warm, smoky, very, very unique. Usually you'll find it exclusively in men's fragrances, but rather than women's fragrances, although you will occasionally find them in more musky women's fragrances. I think it's a great unisex note, which this is in this case. It's also contrasted by a few other notes, including honey, plum, peach, and amber. Now, the fruit notes do really well to counteract the tobacco note, because obviously that tobacco note is going to be very heavy, very kind of thick and smoky. Meanwhile, the fruity notes, and especially that very sweet honey note, they're going to be lightening up the fragrance. And the thing is, while those fragrances do a good job of, making sure the fragrance isn't too heavy, it's still a pretty heavy fragrance, which to me isn't a bad thing. I like heavier fragrances. They're more pronounced, more impressive, but it's something that's more distinct. I don't think the majority of people would like Tobacolor, because it's definitely a very distinct sort of fragrance, mixing like sweet honey notes with tobacco. It's more of a risky thing to do, but it's definitely a very, very interesting fragrance, and if you like those notes in general, there's no reason why you shouldn't enjoy that particular fragrance. Then, in a similar vein, there is Ambre Nuit, Amber Night, and this is also a unisex fragrance. This is a very warm, heavy fragrance, not as heavy as Tobacolor. This is primarily a warm, woodsy fragrance. You've got guaiac wood, cedar, there's some ambergris in there for a more musky sort of scent. There's also pink pepper and some patchouli and some citrus notes. So definitely it has more going on compared to Tobacolor, which is just more pure tobacco. Ambre Nuit is definitely a spicier sort of fragrance with that pepper note, and also with those wood notes, you're going to get this kind of really woodsy, foresty sort of fragrance, which I think is really delightful. And the ambergris note, I would say, it's there, but it's not too strong. Some people don't like that really musky note. I think overall, Ambre Nuit is a very well-balanced fragrance. Definitely smoother than Tobacolor, not as kind of harsh and smoky. And I really like also the citrus notes in the beginning. There's some bergamot that really sparks up the heavier notes in there. So definitely a very well balanced fragrance, long lasting because of those heavy notes like the ambergris and the amber. The cedar. So overall, you're gonna get a really nice unisex fragrance. I would say better for the evening, especially since evening is in the title. But definitely a very versatile evening fragrance. Date night, going out for dinner, going out to the movies, anything like that. Very good fragrance. You could tell that it's high quality as soon as you put it on. Then, a more stereotypically feminine choice is Miss Dior. This is the most floral you could possibly get. It's a huge list of florals, I can't remember all of them, but because of all those florals, it's a very, very sweet fragrance, and at the same time, not sugary sweet. There's plenty of fragrances that are very sugary, like La Vie est Belle from Lacombe, that use actual praline kind of caramel, sweet, sugary notes. This is very different. This is more of a natural, floral, kind of nectar sweetness, which I like. It's not too overwhelming, it's not too sticky, and it's very springtime-esque, very, very good for the summer as well. Refreshing and light, while being surprisingly long-lasting. I remember as soon as I tried it, I was surprised that it pretty much lasted all day, since usually floral fragrances only last a few hours. So it's definitely a more interesting fragrance, and I like how it evolves on the skin over time. It usually becomes a bit of a warmer, still a little bit sweet scent the longer you wear it. It's a very, very interesting fragrance, and it's a classic. There are several formulations. There's Blooming Bouquet, then there's ones that have been released over specific years. The one that I have is from 2021. Of course, they're all going to be somewhat similar, but most of the modern versions are sweeter, because sweet perfumes is what's popular right now. But in general, it's a very refreshing, light, enjoyable, feminine fragrance. Very feminine, definitely. Not really any heavy bass notes or anything like that. So then the last one on the list, which I don't actually own, is Dior Sauvage, which of course is probably the most famous of all Dior fragrances. It's like the staple of men's fragrances. It has very unique notes. It's primarily a spicy, warm, yet slightly crisp sort of fragrance. It has some Sichuan pepper, bergamot, geranium, lavender, pink pepper, lots of different stuff in there, several different types of pepper. You're gonna get this kind of fresh, citrusy burst at the beginning, which kind of melts into this peppery profile. And then you get these floral notes, and some men are wary about using fragrances that contain florals because they might think it's too feminine, but you'll be surprised to know that a lot of popular men's fragrances really need floral notes to kind of counterbalance the heavier notes like the pepper, some wood notes, things like that. So that creates a really delicious, balanced fragrance, which is Dior Sauvage. And I would say that's probably one of the best all-purpose, kind of versatile fragrances. It's definitely more traditionally masculine, but I would argue it's a pretty good unisex fragrance as well. And it's great. It's refreshing, yet warm. It's very unique. The only problem is that it's so popular that you're gonna come across a lot of other people who are also wearing it. So if you want to use something, if you don't want to blend into the crowd, you might want to try something else. But if Dior Sauvage, its notes are your kind of thing, then there's no reason why you shouldn't get it. So those are pretty much my main choices for top Dior fragrances. If you have anything to say about them, you can leave those down in the comments below. If you liked the video, leave a like, maybe subscribe, and I make videos throughout the week, so stick around for those.